And this is my Smart American Accent training. Welcome to our live Saturday question and answer class. It's nice to see so many of you here already. And at the start of class today, I want to take a look at this sentence. So we're going to do a deep dive into shadowing, linking, and reductions, and we're going to start with a little test. So say this sentence out loud. Now say it again and repeat after me. I think you'll be there. The first time you said it, was it the same as when you repeated after me, or was it a little bit different? Listen again. I think you'll be there. Probably the way you said it when you didn't hear me say it first was different than when you repeated and shadowed after me. What was different? Let's break it down for you and show you what I did, how I say this sentence fluently, and how you can do that and practice that as well. So generally speaking, when we have rhythm and stress in American English, we have certain words that are more important. Some words get the beat. This is because English is a stress time language. So important words are going to be longer, they're going to have clear vowels, and unstressed, unimportant words are going to be the weak form. They're going to be shorter, they're going to be reduced and linked. In this phrase, I think you'll be there. If you said it more like, I think he'll be there, or I think he will be there, your rhythm was more syllable timed. You were giving too much time for each word. So you might have been pronouncing the words correctly. There was nothing wrong with how you pronounced each word, but the overall sentence pronunciation was incorrect because you didn't get the correct rhythm. How can we address this? How can we fix this? First, we need to find where are the beats in this sentence. Usually, content words, the words that contain more meaning, are going to be the most important. And in this sentence, what I stressed on was think and be. So these were the two verbs. There's no nouns, there's no adjectives here. And so think and be, the verbs win in this one. They get the beats. If I were to tap it out, I think he'll be there. I get a beat on think and I get a beat on there. That means those are going to be clear and long, and the words in between are going to have to be reduced. So that's part of why we take, instead of he will, we say he'll. It shrinks it down and makes it fit the rhythm better. So if I'm tapping, I think he'll be there, the I and he'll and there are going to be very short, and they're going to have to be linked and squished in to fit. I think he'll be there. And so how do I do this? First of all, I reduce. So for example, the he will becomes he'll, and this can become reduced even further. It loses its E sound. If I was stressing on it, I think he'll be there, I'd get the strong E. When I'm reducing, I think he'll be there, I think he'll be there. The E becomes more of an I, and then we take it one step further, and we lose that H sound because we link from the think, and we end up with, I think he'll be there, I think he'll be there. So I think, no change on think. I think he'll, the think links to the ill, think he'll, I think he'll be there. Be is nice and long and stressed, and there just is our dropping off. I think he'll be there. Pitch-wise, I'm going to be sort of steady here throughout. I reserve my pitch changes to show that something is finished or to give something some extra stress. In this case, I'm going to stay at a medium pitch. I think he'll, and then I might go up a little and down. I think he'll be there. I think he'll be there. Once I have this rhythm, so you can practice that by shadowing and repeating after me. And once you have this as an example phrase, it can serve as an anchor point for you. Anytime you're saying, I think, you're going to probably have some stress on think and then the content word in the phrase. So I think he'll do it. I think he'll go there. I think he'll have to. They all follow that same rhythm. And so practicing on one example can help you expand to many different ways of using that correct rhythm, that correct stress pattern, and understanding and getting that linking in those small changes. Let's look at one more phrase, and we're going to do a little bit more practice, and then I'll turn to your questions. It's so nice to see so many of you here already today. and I appreciate all the nice comments and the support that you've been watching on my videos in between the classes. If you have questions about this topic or other topics, you can put them in the chat at any time or in the comments. I'll get back to those after class. Okay, so let's look at one more phrase. In the phrase, let's have you say this one again. So say it without me. Did you say, I don't know, I don't know? Or did you say, I don't know? Or even, I do not know? Again, it sounds correct. The words are okay if you're saying it word by word, but we will link and reduce on a phrase like this. Even with just the 3 words, we have an important word and 2 less important words. So again, in this case, our verb is going to get stressed. I don't know, I don't know. And no is going to be longer. And then there's a couple of different ways we reduce. So I can say, I don't know, but you can hear how it sounds overpronounced. It doesn't sound natural. So one thing that we do is we get rid of the T in I don't know, I don't know. That's because we're going from an N sound here to an N sound here. So as I link it, I don't know, I don't know. I can just use one N. Then another thing that we tend to do, so one correct way, I don't know. I don't know. With this being long and these being quick. I don't know. Another way you'll hear this is that because the don't is not as important as the no, because the no is the content word at the end, we'll end up with a reduced vowel here, and it ends up sounding a little bit more like I don't know. Not stressed on duh. That's a poor example. I don't do I don't know. I just do I don't know. I don't know. So no keeps its clear vowel, but the don't loses its O because it's going to be fast and reduced. Because we need to keep that rhythm going and keep those beats even in our phrases, our sentences, our paragraphs, we end up reducing reducing sounds, changing the sounds, and linking things together in order to keep the overall rhythm the same. Which is why when you learn pronunciation in English, if you just work on words, you're going to end up still sounding a little bit unnatural in fluent speech. So looking at breaking down where the stressed parts are, where the beats go, and where the unstressed reduced parts are can be very helpful in getting that real natural sound. So for each of these, I would say these are professional, standard. You can use them in any context. There is one more reduction that we do with this phrase from I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, all the way down to something a little more like I don't know. So where we lose even the D sound. So if I said to you, I don't know, I don't know, you understand that I'm saying I don't know. Now this one I would say is a little bit more casual. I might not use that with my boss or in a more professional setting. I'd stick with one of these ones in the middle. But in general conversation with friends, as you're talking, I don't know, I don't know. It's really mostly the rhythm and that clear vowel in the stressed part that the rest of it, your brain fills it in and it knows that I'm saying I do not know or I don't know. Even if I'm just giving you a bare minimum of the sounds, the rhythm is really dictating what's happening here. So on Tuesday next week, I'm going to have a video for you talking about being able to do more speaking practice, how to use shadowing, and how rhythm is really so important, almost more important than clear pronunciation, because that's how we speak naturally and fluently as native speakers. And you can learn some of these types of reductions, how to listen for the rhythm and how to apply that, both by shadowing and by learning specifics. And I have a lot of videos for you here on the channel about that, as well as that's what I cover in my Real Talk course on speechmodification.com. I go through how to link and reduce, looking at example sentences, looking at listening to TV and movies, so you can really get some of these techniques and apply them in your own speech. Because of course, you can't break down every sentence you're ever going to say and think about beats and think about reductions. But when you get those rhythms a little bit more naturally in your head, you can start to hear them around you. Your brain is going to work out that intonation. You're probably actually doing more of this already without knowing about it than you realize if you're speaking English all the time and if you're surrounded by native speakers. And if you're not and you don't have the opportunity to do that, my video is also going to show you some ways you can be practicing on your own to develop those skills. So thanks for bearing with me for the first part of class. I'll turn to your questions now. And as I said before, leave them in the chat or you can leave them in the comments. I'll come back to you later if you're not watching this live. You can ask about rhythm, American accent, pronunciation of words, whatever is going to help you be a more confident speaker of English. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say today, and it's wonderful to see so many of you here and people who are coming back week after week. So welcome. I really appreciate you attending class, and your support means a lot to me. Okay, wonderful. So we have a question from one of our members. Thank you for your membership and for all of your recent comments. I hope I've been able to help you adequately with the comments. With my responses. So let's look at how to pronounce primarily. So in primarily, we have the stressed syllable is the mer syllable, and letters AR say the air sound. So in the IPA, you'll see it like this. In primarily, we do have some secondary stress on the pri syllable. So letter I is going to say the full I sound like in right or night. So primarily. And then this letter I is going to be unstressed, reduced. It'll sound like the I sound. Letter Y at the ends of words is a tense E. It's not stressed, so it's short, but make sure that you keep it nice and high, E in that front sound. So primarily. When you can say primarily by itself, don't forget to put it in some short phrases. I primarily cover English pronunciation and American accent on my channel. She's primarily working during the day these days. Okay, thank you. And thank you for being a channel member. I appreciate your support and all of your comments and questions on the videos. Okay, and a second channel member, it's nice to see you here as well. Thank you for being part of the class. He has a question about poor and poor. So for me, these two are the same, and I use just the or sound for both of them. So looking at how to pronounce poor versus poor, in some areas of the US, this and this are the same, and they both sound like or. In some areas of the US, they will use more of an oor here, and it'll sound more like poor with an oo sound. And if I use that rounded tense oo, so poor, then I end up with some vowel to vowel linking. As I move from that really tense oo into the poor, that w glide just naturally connects those two. And so you don't hear it as two separate syllables. It's not poor, but rather poor. The w should just happen because you're starting off with a very round, tense oo sound. In poor, it does have a little bit of that vowel to vowel linking, or, poor, but you can really just kind of build that from the or sound. So saying or, poor. And for me and for many areas of the US, these two can be the same. So he poured the drink very poorly. Yeah, so a couple of different options for this one, and this one is always just or. The spelling is a little confusing. We really should spell it like this. We do also have this word, pore, the pores in your skin, same pronunciation as well. Thank you for that question and for being a channel member. It's nice to see you here this morning. Okay, we have a question about how to pronounce material and materialize. Okay, so for material, let's look at how to pronounce material and materialize. In material, our stress is on the tear syllable, and here letters ER say the ear sound. I'll write it here with EAR. You could also think about it like EER. Basically, it's a high ear gliding to R diphthong. And then because the stress is here on the tier syllable, then letters MA are going to be unstressed and they're going to be a reduced vowel. So letter A is going to say the schwa, the sound. I would rewrite that as ma, tier. I think I'll use this one because this can be tier or tear, so that might be a little confusing to you. So visualize it this way as ear, matir, and then as we go from the ear to the E, this is one of the few times when the letter I does say the E sound in American English. Typically, letter I, you can count on it being the I sound, but in some of these words, E8, EL, letter I will be that tense E sound. Then we have a schwa, another schwa for the letter A, and the final L sound. Matir, E, O. Material, O. So you might also actually hear it kind of as a there, material, O, material. I think it's more of a schwa. But as I'm going from the E to that schwa before the L, E-L, here's another place where I'll have vowel to vowel linking. So there's going to be a y sound here, but they're not going to put that in the dictionary IPA because it's not an added sound. It just happens naturally as I move from the E to the E-ya. That's called vowel to vowel linking, and you can get more details for that in my videos here on the channel for that, as well as in our Sounds of English course. I'll walk you through that, where it happens and how to do that. Okay, so going slowly syllable by syllable, you would sound like material, material, material. And then if we look at materialize, the eel, just eel, those syllables go a little faster, and then we end up with eyes at the end. So materialize. And in this case, you might think about it more like materialize, where the L can go on that last syllable. It doesn't matter, the L connects those two final syllables, but if it's easier for you to visualize it this way and do the initial L, that's what I would suggest. Thank you, that's a good request, and nice to see you here again this week. Okay, welcome Undead Heart, nice to see you here, glad you made it this week. And you are asking a general question about the indefinite article Most of the time it's a schwa. Sometimes natives pronounce it as a or eh. Is this about stress? Yeah, so this is an interesting one. The correct pronunciation of the article a place, a time, a person, is always going to be It's always going to be schwa. But native speakers do sometimes say something a little bit more like a person. I think of a person. And I think this mostly has to do with either when someone is reading something and they see this, because the letter is called A, they may have a tendency to say A, or if there's some reason why it's stressed or I'm lingering on it. So I might say, for example, if I was trying to think of I'd probably say that think of and I would hold on the schwa. But this is kind of an ugly sound that people don't always like to hold because usually it's very short. Schwa, part of what makes schwa schwa is that it's unstressed and short. So when we get to a case like think of a, we may not always hold on we might change to more of think of a. That's one place where I hear people do that. Other places where people say a, maybe when they're starting on it, if they're just saying a project. To me, it always sounds wrong, even when native speakers do it, but you're right. Native speakers do sometimes say a. What I always recommend to my non-native speakers, though, is just focus on using because it's always going to sound natural. The problem for a non-native speaker, if they're using some sort of a, is that you may use a sound from your native language like or something that doesn't really match. A native speaker can kind of get away with this because it fits into, they're going to be using either this kind of full A diphthong we have, or something that's natural for American English. A non-native speaker, if they're not using and they go to a clear vowel, are likely to use not the same thing a native speaker would. So in general, focus on thinking of these as and keeping them nice and short and unstressed. Thanks for bringing that up. That's definitely something that a lot of people ask about, and I think it's important to know. And it's one of the obviously most common words we use, probably the second most common word we use overall. So if you're using it incorrectly, it's going to have a big impact on how you sound. Okay, great to see so many of you here, and I will definitely try to get to everyone's questions. Ask your most important question first, and I'll come back later and answer second and third questions if you have them and if there's time. So we have a question about, just a general question about American R. So I do have a full American R playlist, and I go into a lot of details and help for American R in my Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com. So I'm going to recommend you check those out for some more help. Generally speaking, to give you some quick tips on R. So the R in American English is, anytime you see the letter R written, you're going to say the R sound. You're going to say So even if it's something like her or paper, you're going to have the same mouth position for that R as you are for rain or red. And what that mouth position is that the tongue is going to be pulled back in the mouth. Either the tip of the tongue is either curled or bunched back, and the sides of the tongue are going to be on the inner upper teeth. So to try to visualize that, if this is the roof of my mouth and this is my bottom jaw and here's my front teeth, my tongue is going to be bunched up here, and I can feel when I say I can feel the sides of my tongue touching my upper teeth, kind of on the inside. If you don't have that contact, you're probably going to be too soft, like more of an sound. The most typical issue that people have is that in other languages, the R is more of a rolled or flap R. So that's like this in the IPA, this one's like this. And that's made with the tongue lifting up here repeatedly. So when I do or perro, with one touch up, it's going to be a flap sound. Basically, if your tongue is lifting in the front, you're not doing the American R. We never put our R here. Our R is always lifting in the back. And it's always got a kind of tight tongue. So finding where it's easier for you to make that R position, once you learn about it, you may find it's different for you in the ends of words rather than the beginnings of words. In British English, in the UK, and many other places, when the R is in the middle or the end, they don't do the American R. They don't do the tight R there. They would say her or paper, and that's more of a relaxed tongue in the back. It doesn't have that tight connection that I was describing. In American English, her, rain, I'm using the exact same position. Just when I'm doing her, I'm sliding into it. When I'm doing rain, I'm sliding out of it. So that's kind of a lot of detail. I would say definitely check out my American R playlist here on the channel. I'll walk you through ways to practice, tips and words that have R, kind of how to get all that, and then even more in my Sounds of English course. Thanks for asking about that. That's definitely a difficult and challenging sound for a lot of people because a lot of languages don't have that rhotic R that we have in American English. Okay. Let's see, specific videos about each phonics alphabet. Yes, so I do have a Sounds of English playlist here on the channel, and as I mentioned before, my Sounds of English course on speech modification is going to talk about each and every consonant and vowel sound. I have a couple quick videos here that you might like where I go through each one briefly and talk about them, give you example words and sounds, walk you through, and then I do have videos for every single one. And on our new channel, Pronounce English, I'm making some new videos for each sound. So there's a few on there now for the NG and the flap sounds. And over the next couple of months, I'll be building a new library of basic videos really explaining each sound. So jump over to the Pronounce English channel. I'll put the link in the description below here, and you can also go to our community page. I've been working on a Word of the Day challenge, so we've had a new word video every day this month, and all through January we'll have that Word of the Day challenge, as well as slowly adding those sounds on the Pronounce English channel. Thanks for that question. Okay. We have a question about how to pronounce poem. So this is one of the controversial words in English. Not really, but native speakers argue about how to say this. In my opinion, and in the dictionary, you will see this as poem, 2 syllables. So we have the first syllable is stressed, has the O diphthong. I'll rewrite that here with OH because it's to help you think of it as being long, po. And then poem, we have the schwa sound for letter E and the sound with closed lips. So I think of it as poem. But again, you can hear as I'm moving from that O to the rounded O to the unrounded we have a little bit of vowel to vowel linking in there. So poem. You can hear that if I make a smooth connection between the O and the W glide kind of sneaks in there. Some people will say it more just as poem, with kind of just the O right to the M, rhyming with, for example, home. That's another way that people pronounce it, and some people argue for that or advocate for that pronunciation. I would go with this one, poem, 2 syllables. I think that's, in my opinion, correct. I could check the dictionary again and see if they include this one, but that's definitely a question word that many people have, so thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we have a question about the word, how to pronounce the word. Let's see. I'm going to come back to your question about reward so that I can answer some other people's questions first, and then I'll try to make time for that later. We have a question, why does the word word not have a silent E? So the silent E is usually used when there's 1 or 2 consonant sounds. So, for example, if I had a word like war, that's one I can think of with a letter R, where the E makes the O-R say or, whereas here we don't have it, and the O-R says word. But generally speaking, that E rule doesn't go so much with when there's an R. So if I'm saying, for example, code, this O is going to say the O sound, versus cod, the fish, this O is going to say the ah sound. That's because the E, when it's at the end and is silent, typically makes the letter name say its name. So code would have the long O, ride would have the long I sound, versus rid, no E has the short I sound. So I versus I, for example. So word, if it had an E, generally to me that would signify like more than 1 syllable, like ward, right? So for example, like in warden. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what you're asking about for this word and the E sound. Maybe you can ask a follow-up question if I didn't answer your question with my explanation. But silent E is a good pattern to know about for spelling and sounds, because it does often, an E at the end often does change how we pronounce that vowel sound. Okay, great. We have a question about pronunciation for the short sound of letter A. Okay, so I typically don't use short and long. I just did a moment ago when I was talking about silent E. But basically what you mean by short A is probably the A sound. I call that the black cat vowel. I like to use example words because I think that helps you remember the sound. I also use the IPA symbols so you can get used to seeing those in a dictionary. But basically, some people will call this short A, and for long A, they mean the A diphthong, which I call great day. So for this ah sound, basically what you want to have is the mouth position is that your jaw is going to be more open than it is for this A or for the other front vowels. If we look at the vowel quadrangle, the ah sound is here in the open front position. So open means my jaw is going to be a little more open versus, for example, the I sound like hit, the ah sound like hat. When I say hit, my tongue is high in the mouth. Hat, jaw is a little more open and the front of the tongue is all the way down. Hat. So it's behind my front upper teeth. But the back of my tongue is still lifted. Hat. Versus if I say hot, hot, my whole tongue is down. So there's space in all of my mouth. So this one is an open back vowel. This is an open front vowel. Ha, meaning the back of my tongue is still lifted when I say this ah sound. Hat versus hot. The other error that people sometimes have is difficulty making a difference between the eh and the ah sound. So for example, if I had bet versus bat, or men versus man. So with bet, my tongue is just more flat. My jaw is not as open. The ah front of the tongue is down, jaw is the most open. Yeah, so that's just a quick run through of that ah sound. Again, in my Sounds of English course, I'm going to walk you through how to make the sound, what accent error patterns to watch out for, how it's spelled, what words it's in, and a really thorough look at that sound. Also, I'll be covering that sound soon on our Pronounce English channel. So if you haven't yet jumped over there to see our Word of the Day challenge or subscribe to that channel, I highly recommend it because I'm going to be walking through a lot of real solid fundamentals for word and sound pronunciation. On this channel, with my long form videos, I'm focusing a little bit more on more advanced fluent speaking. Of course, I have over 5,000 videos here on the channel, so there's many word pronunciation and sound pronunciation videos here as well. If you're having trouble finding what you're looking for, one place to start is our playlists and also our search box on the channel page. You can type in your word or your sound or your question, and videos I have related to that will come up. But if that's not working for you, I never mind answering questions and comments. So leave a comment on any of my videos and I'll direct you to some good resources for the videos that you're looking for to answer your questions. And thanks to those of you who have been commenting and liking, sharing the videos. That really does help signal to YouTube that this is content that people like you would like to see. And it shows you the videos more, which also helps us to grow. So I appreciate all of that from you. Okay, we have a question about what time is the live stream. So this is our weekly live stream on Saturdays. It starts at 8:30 West Coast time, 11:30 a.m. East Coast time. And then usually our other new videos drop very early in the morning on Tuesdays. Sometimes I have some shorts and other videos throughout the week. You can look, I will always on the community page give you a heads up about what's coming. And you can see the upcoming live streams on our channel page as well. Great. Okay, we have a question about how to pronounce eligibility. So let's go to that. Okay, wow, so many questions today. I hope I have time to get to everyone. So we have a question about, let's make it a little bit bigger. Eligibility. Okay, so let's look at how to pronounce eligibility. Words that have ility at the end are typically stressed on the syllable before the ility. So eligibility, that's where the stress falls here. Eligibility, which means that elig and ity are all going to be faster, maybe have reduced vowels, and the bill is going to be our clear stressed I sound. So that in eligibility, it's long enough that we have secondary stress as well. So letter E is going to be the clear F vowel. So we'll have some secondary stress there. So I. So this letter I says a short reduced I sound. This letter G in this word is a J sound, which I would write as J like in jump for my respelling so that you can visualize that. We do, of course, spell the J sound with letter G in a lot of words as well, like gentleman or general. The symbol for that is this, J. And then we have, so L, I, J, Bill, I, D. And notice I wrote here this with the D. It's not a true D sound. I'm not bursting the air out. It's a flap sound, which generally you're just going to see it as a T in the dictionary. I'll write it like that to mark that it's a flap. But basically, because it's connecting two vowels and it's not followed by a stressed syllable, it'll just be one quick lift, quick roll of the tongue. So eligibility. One thing that might help, because this is a longer word, is just start on the stressed syllable. So you would say ability, gibility, eligibility. You can also go slowly, syllable by syllable. Eligibility, eligibility. So yes, we took a look at how to pronounce eligibility. Thanks for that request. It's definitely a useful one for a lot of people, and it contains some patterns that are helpful for other words that have ability or ability at the end. Okay. Please repeat the right way of pronunciation of the word many times at the end when you explain it. Yeah, okay, so probably in this class, I'm not going to have time to do multiple repetitions, but that's a great suggestion for my individual videos so that you can get a lot of practice and repetition. So this is more of a teaching class, but in my other videos, I often try to give you example words or repetition or building it slowly so that you can practice and repeat for that. You might also like my podcasts, which are really designed for practice, so you can go through and I'll say it and pause. You can repeat after me. Also in my shadowing videos, same thing. I try to go slowly, give you lots of repetitions for practice. So thanks for that suggestion, and I'll keep that in mind as I'm making this future videos. Okay. We had a question about how to speak English like, and maybe your question got cut off. So go ahead and finish that sentence out for me later if you like. Great. So I'm going to go through and read your suggestions later. You have people having great ideas. Also, if you have suggestions that you'd like to see videos made for or style changes for your practice, I really welcome those. Probably the best place to do that is on a comment on this video so that I can read it. During the chat, I'm kind of looking for questions that I can answer immediately. Okay. Okay, so we had a question about the A versus the sound. They sound kind of the same. So we talked about this briefly when we were looking at the A sound in general. And here's my sound. No, I'm having trouble today with being a little dyslexic on that sound for some reason. So the sound. So this is like in head or read, and this is like in had or sad. Excuse me. Especially this is difficult for people with words like men versus man. I often notice that those are really tricky for people, and I have several videos for that. So I do have quite a few videos about the and a sounds. Basically, the mouth position details of it is that when I'm saying my jaw is not going to be as open, and my tongue is going to be a little bit flatter. Both of them are open vowels for the front, and so that means the back of the tongue is not going to be down and open. But the because it's not as open, the tongue is flatter. And for the I'm really going to see the front of my tongue down and the back of my tongue lifted. I think practicing something like head and had can be pretty difficult to do those minimal pairs, though also useful. But better might be, for example, if I'm trying to work on head versus had, what I would do is use a totally different word here. So, for example, like I have bed, head, and that had. So if I look at bed versus that, I might have less difficulty with those vowels than if I'm doing the minimal pairs. So that's usually a suggestion I have, and you can see a lot of examples for that in my minimal pairs playlist. Also, for each of these videos, or each of these sounds, check out our Pronounce English channel. In the coming weeks, I'll be having new videos for those. I do have videos for each of them here on the channel, as well as contrast videos. And lastly, of course, our Sounds of English course is really going to help you hear those differences between vowels. Those two are definitely some of the toughest for non-native speakers because typically they're not going to be in your native language, so you're going to have a tendency to want to use more of an A sound for the eh and an ah sound for the ah. They're also different. The ah is different between British and American English where we use them. So I understand why you would find those difficult, and I highly recommend those other resources for you. Once you take a little time with it, oftentimes you can get to be able to hear them more easily, and then that helps you be able to pronounce them more easily. Kind of visualizing, having some anchor points for knowing how they're spelled, what the sounds are, all of those things can be really helpful. So it's not an impossible thing to fix, it's just challenging as you mentioned. So I hope those tips help you. Okay, great. Let's see. So we have a question about where were you, or where we're at. So difficult to make those distinct, but in fluent speech can't make them sound distinct. So yeah, it's hard to go from where, which has the air sound, to were, which has the sound. Yeah, so where were you, or where, what was your other one? Where we're at. So, and then for we're, we have the ear sound. So where were, where we're, definitely hard. One tip for this one is that in fluent speech, if I'm not stressing on this, if I'm not saying we're doing it or we're there, I'm gonna actually say this one more like were. So when I say where we're at, I actually say it as where we're at, not where we're at, because we're just gets reduced. It's less important there, where we're at. So if that's what's troubling you, that you're feeling like you're not making a difference between we're and were, that's because in fluent speech we don't. We make we're as were. If it's between where and were and where and we're, thinking about air as sliding more, air, and ear as being higher, or as being flatter, no slide on it, that can help you. I do have some videos about where, we're, were, all of those w and diphthong combinations, so that those might help you as well. Picturing and visualizing, I think the spelling of these is very confusing because they all have the ERE. So I would visualize where as this one, were as this one, or even I've had clients who've said this helps them with were, thinking of the other kind of were that sounds the same. And we're, if you have to say the full form, thinking of it as this, but also knowing that this one becomes the same as this one, that we're often becomes were. So kind of a complicated answer. I hope that helps you. If it didn't clear up your question, you can leave a follow-up question in a comment or in the chat. Okay, great to see so many of you here this morning. Welcome back. And as I said, I'll try to get to everyone's questions. If I somehow miss yours along the way, I'm kind of scrolling through as we go, as you can see. Please do leave it in a comment as well. You can even put it there now. And after class, I do go back, read through those, and send you links, answer your questions in a comment as well. But my goal is to get to at least one of everyone's questions today. So let's move on to the next question. We have a question about the word dour, and whether it rhymes with tour or tower. So let's look at how to pronounce dour, tour, and tower. So these two look the same, but they don't sound the same. Dour actually sounds the same as tower. So when I'm saying dour, I have the ow diphthong, and then the sound, And so even though there's no written W in dour, that w happens as I link between the ow, which is rounded, and the which is unrounded. So I would rewrite that like dour. And that might make more sense to the brain. Obviously, this confusion comes from how it's spelled, but yes, tower and dour have the same sounds with a different initial sound. Versus tour, again, in tour, we have the oo sound, and it'll be more even tenser and more rounded, and it also has that hidden w sound. So tour, I have the vowel to vowel linking between the oo and the so on tour. There are some places and some people that will say this more like on tour. They'll use more of an or there. But for me and for a lot of native speakers, it's actually a full or, tour. Just like before when we were talking about poor. For that one, I do change that to poor, and other people say poor. So tour and poor, if you're an oor person, those two are the same. Yeah, totally confusing on the spelling. Sounds that aren't written in there, words that are spelled the same but don't sound the same. Unfortunately, even though there are some good patterns you can rely on and use to understand English pronunciation, there's a lot of exceptions to the rules. So that's why I always like to rewrite words with alternate spelling to show you the IPA so you can really hone in on what the sounds are in a word, visualize it in a new way to help you remember the correct pronunciation. That was a great question. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. We have a question about the word better. So confusion for you is between better and bitter. So we're coming back to our front vowels here. A lot of vowel questions today. In bitter, our tongue is going to be pretty high. It's very high and the mouth is much more closed. Bitter. Versus better, my tongue is, my sound here, sound is more, that flat tongue, jaw is a little bit more open. So for bitter, we're going to have, you can even go all the way up to bead or beat, E, so it's going to be closer to the E. You don't want to say beater, obviously that's going to be also problematic, but in bitter, the tongue is just a little bit lower than it is for the E. In better, the tongue is in basically the same position it is for the schwa. So one thing that could help you potentially is using a word that has schwa, like butter. My tongue is very flat, jaws closed, tongues resting in the bottom. Butter and better. My tongue is just going to be a little bit lifted in the back here. And so that when I do butter, flat tongue down in the bottom, better, back of the tongue lifted a little bit more, and the sound happens more in the front of the mouth. So if this is giving you trouble, think about trying to raise iter and flatten and open more for better. For Arabic speakers, this I and is very difficult. They typically say their I sounds as S sounds. That's a pretty common error. So instead of saying it is bitter, that all of that might sound like it is better. For an Arabic speaker, they just tend to open a little bit too much when they're trying to do this I sound. So that could be an issue for you, or it might just be that is difficult. Sometimes I actually think adding in the third batter can be helpful, even though that might seem more complicated to be working on 3 vowels. When I know I have to have 3 distinct placements, then I reserve space for the a to be the most open and the I to be the most high, and then the has to settle in between. So if you can't go better in that direction, you might try actually opening more and going batter, better, bitter. So sometimes people find going from the top to the bottom helps. Bit, bet, bat. Other people going from the more open to the more closed helps. Bat, bet, bit. I have some videos for that here on the channel, and in my Sounds of English course, I walk through those three front lax vowels. Sometimes it's really about, you kind of have to get all three before any of them gel on their own. If I'm just trying to do the middle one and I don't have the top and the bottom, it can be more difficult. So I hope that helps you. Yeah, and I'm sorry my earlier videos didn't help you with that. I definitely think that those sounds can be tricky when they're not in your native language, and but stick with it and you'll get there eventually, I'm sure. Okay, thanks for being here and thanks for your question. Okay. We have another poem speaker, so I'm with you on that. Okay, so we have a question about relaxing the throat when speaking English. So if you're feeling tension anywhere as you're speaking English, probably you're using tension to create the new sounds rather than keeping things open and relaxed. So if it's happening here in the throat, one of the things I would recommend is trying to just see where else you might be tense. Like right now I feel a little tense in my shoulders and my neck. I'm speaking quickly. I'm trying to get to everyone's questions, so it's making me create this tension. To relax that, I want to relax the other parts of my speaking apparatus, neck, shoulders, face. Those I have a little bit more conscious control over relaxing. It's very hard to relax the throat and the voice, but if you relax the muscles around, the ones you have more conscious control over, it will relax. The other thing that can relax the throat when you're speaking is using some light, easy onsets with your voice. So if I'm saying, for example, using some of those filler sounds and just seeing how I can make a sound without having to clench anything in my throat at all. And not worrying so much about precise articulation and more about getting rhythms and keeping it very relaxed. So I did a recent video talking, it says on the thumbnail, you say more or use more fillers, which most people say, oh, get rid of those fillers. They sound unprofessional. You sound nervous. And yeah, I don't want to be using tons and tons of fillers, but they are a device that we use to reset the voice, to relax, and to be in that sort of relaxed central tongue position. So before you say something, try just saying, and then go into what you're saying. See if you can carry that relaxed feeling you have in or into the rest of what you're saying. You don't need a lot of strong mouth positions or tension here to speak English correctly. You actually need to be able to relax some of that more. And my upcoming video next week, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So tune back in on Tuesday and maybe that will help answer your question as well. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Question about comfortable, interesting. So yes, in interesting, we don't say interesting. We just reduce this to interesting. I've covered that recently in a couple of videos. Same thing with comfortable. We don't do comfortable, but rather comfortable. So kind of weird, but correct. There are cases where I might say interesting if I'm really dragging it out, like, oh, interesting. But if I'm saying an interesting book, an interesting movie, an interesting discussion, I'm always going to use the 3-syllable version. Comfortable is always 3 syllables. I'm never going to do comfortable. That's just incorrect. I might do comfortable. Well, okay, so you could potentially do comfortable, but comfortable is by far the most commonly used way of pronouncing that. So good observation. Yeah, those are definitely words that we reduce down the syllables to make them more fluent. Okay, we're going to take a couple more and then we're out of time. Boy, an hour goes by super fast with so many great questions like you guys have today. We'll be back again next Saturday, so I apologize in advance if I didn't get to everyone's question. But as I said before, please do leave them in a comment so that I can follow up with you so you can get your questions answered. Okay. question about which syllable should be stressed. Are there rules to identify stress when pronouncing words as a Spanish speaker? Oh, thank you so much for your gift. The gift memberships are going out to some of our viewers. That's a wonderful way to support the channel and to help each other. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Okay. So where we were at with was syllable stress and how to know. There are some patterns in English, and for Spanish speakers, I would say one of the common things that Spanish speakers tend to do is to stress on the first syllable. So what I would do if I were you is focus on finding words that have second syllable stress. So for example, in this word, we stress on self. So it's not myself, but rather myself. Same thing then, that's a pattern that happens for all of the others, like himself, herself, themselves. So when you learn one of those words and you practice with it, that can help you for that overall pattern. Another pattern we have is that words with ation or ishan are going to be stressed on the a and I syllables. So definition, communication, that's another pattern you can count on. Unfortunately, where the stress falls in a word depends on how that word came into English. So we have a lot of different changeable patterns because of the history of the language. It was a Germanic language, and then it was influenced by the French and by Latin. Then we had some sound shift changes between Middle English, Late English, Middle English, and Modern English. All of that left us with our crazy spelling, our crazy rhythms. In my American Accent 6-week course, I include some pretty comprehensive word lists, all of the common everyday words that are stressed on the first syllable, the second syllable, the third syllable. And I do have some free practice exercises for that as well, and a couple of videos here on the channel. So what I would do is focus in on, as you're listening, if you start identifying which words you have sorted incorrect in your mind, and for you, I would say definitely start with second syllable stress words, you'll start to notice that you hear words differently and you're able to more identify which ones you're doing incorrectly. I notice that a lot with my clients. So once we start working on it, tuning into where the stress falls in a word, then you start to be able to shift over and hear differently, hear the patterns in your speech. So it's really about kind of tuning into it and focusing on it. And then also just to know that in the dictionary, they do mark the syllable stress. They'll put a little line before the stressed syllable. And you can look for that and also use the online dictionary where you can click on it and hear it, because seeing this might not tell your brain much, but if you hear myself and you hear that the self is stretched and the my is short and reduced, that's something you can imitate more and get into the brain more. So unfortunately, there's no quick rule or anything I can teach you that's going to tell you for every word where it's stressed. But if you start to work on it slowly, word by word, that will generalize to understanding most words more easily. Also look for words that you learned from reading versus from speaking, because oftentimes if you heard it first and imitated it, you're going to get the stress right. If you read it first, you won't always know where the stress is. And the other thing to watch out for is look for words that are the same in Spanish and English or similar. Double check those words, because you're going to naturally want to stress it in the Spanish way, and it might be different in English. That's the other starting point, I'd say. Second syllable stress and words that are similar in Spanish. Double check on those. Okay, so not a quick fix, but hopefully still helpful information for you. Thanks for being here and for bringing that question up. Okay, so let's see. We have a question about speaking English. Oh, let's see. Let's take a question about the word dinner. So let's look at how to pronounce dinner. We have first syllable stress in this word. Letter I says the I sound like in it. And then we have a tight back sound. So I would think about it like din or dinner. I'll write this with two N's because if we have just one N, that becomes the word diner with the I sound, like a diner, a place that you eat. Dinner is the meal. Yeah, pretty straightforward, but maybe a little bit confusing on the vowels and how to pronounce that. So hopefully that answers it for you. Okay, let's just check and see. I'm going a little overtime today, and I'm going to have to wrap it up because moving on with the next steps of my day. But I really love your questions today. It's so great to see so many of you here week after week asking these great questions that help other people and not just you. So it's great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you again next Saturday, same time. Tuesday we'll have a new video talking about how to work on speaking more, how to kind of get over that gap you may have between understanding everything well but not feeling natural or fluent when you speak. So give me some feedback on that. Watch the video on Tuesday and leave some comments. Tell me if you like that direction. And on any of my videos, I appreciate your feedback, your suggestions. Thank you to those of you who had some suggestions and tips for me here in the chat today. I'll look at those over after class, and you can also leave me a comment with your requests, your suggestions, and your questions. I'll direct you to resources here on the channel and on our website, speechmodification.com. Great class today. So nice to see so many of you here, and thank you for your support in the likes, the comments, the shares, the gift memberships. That's all so wonderful. I really appreciate you all, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. Thanks so much. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Hope to see you again on Tuesday.